Welcome to the Vintage Athlete Podcast, specially designed for retired athletes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Vintage Athlete Podcast. I am so happy that you're here because today we're going to talk about a really important topic and kind of the center of all of the things that we need to tackle as former athletes. And that is athlete identity. And I want to talk about athlete identity because I think it really is one of the single most important things that athletes need to address in sports retirement. And it really does have an effect on everything that happens after that. So I really feel like it's an important thing to address. And so let's start first by talking about what it is. So what is athlete identity? The definition that I like to use is that it's the extent to which a person identifies with being an athlete. So it refers to the psychological attachment that people form with their athletic abilities, achievements, and their involvement in sports. So many athletes still cling to that athlete identity after they retire from sport, which is understandable, right? There's so many reasons why you would want to hold on to that. There's those feelings of accomplishment and success that you were able to have as an athlete, the recognition of other people based on those accomplishments. That always feels good, right? Recognition and praise from others for what you've worked so hard to do. And you have worked so hard as an athlete, and you want to continue to benefit from the hard work that you've done. So in a lot of ways, it makes sense for athletes to want to hold on to that. Many current and former athletes don't realize that there's research and studies that show that the stronger a person's athlete identity is in retirement, the more they struggle to adapt to life outside their sport. So when you retire from a sport, there's a couple different ways that can happen, right? There can be voluntary retirement or involuntary retirement. So let's talk a little bit about each one. Voluntary means that it was something that the athlete planned, right, at a certain time that they were going to be done competing in their sport. And so that might occur after like accomplishing a specific goal or graduating from college or high school. Or maybe it's a decision that they made intentionally, either from a lack of desire or interest to continue with their sport. But regardless of the specific reason, it was something that they chose to do, right? And that was something that maybe they had some time to plan for as well. Involuntary retirement can be a result of things like a significant injury or being cut from a team, or maybe it's a plateau of skills that prevent an athlete from moving to the next level. It could be a change in funding or a financial situation. So in involuntary retirement, it's not something that the athlete chose to do. It's circumstances or situation that came up that's basically forcing them to discontinue their sport. So involuntary or voluntary. And what the research also shows is that athletes who had to involuntarily retire from their sport have even more difficulty with that transition. This can lead to a lot of issues, including loss of identity, that can lead to an identity crisis, right? Or depression or anxiety, social isolation, physical health issues, that could also include an increased risk for injuries or chronic conditions, right? So involuntary retirement can have even bigger effects, especially if an athlete is really holding on to that athlete identity after they discontinue their sport. So if you think about it, if you're no longer competing in your sport, but you hold tight to that athlete identity, it can lead to feeling like you're not sure who you are without your sport, right? Or what your strengths are outside of your sport, or even what makes you happy in your life after retirement. So for those reasons, I truly feel like evolving from a strong athlete identity is the first and most important step in ensuring that you lead a fulfilling and meaningful and value-based life after sport. So really, this is kind of the step one of it all. So what do we hold on to then in retirement as part of our athlete identity? So what stories do we tell, or what rules do we have for ourselves that we're still functioning with, even if they don't serve us anymore? Because when we mainly see ourselves as this one role, this athlete role, it comes with these rules and these judgments that we create for ourselves. So as an example, I was a gymnast and I was very skilled at moving my own body. I did gymnastics. There was a lot of dance involved in that. I was very good at moving my body. But when it came to sports and activities that involved me using equipment like balls or rackets or bats or anything like that, it was so much harder for me. And so even though I was strong and I was athletic my whole childhood and into my early adulthood, I had made this rule for myself that I'm not good at sports where I have to use an object, not just my body. And that was a rule that I created based on my experience, but I was very determined to keep that in place. So over time, and as I got older and as I moved away from my sport, I often declined or avoided joining events or groups that involve these things, like joining, a dodgeball tournament or the work softball team, or, playing ping pong or tennis with a friend when I was invited to do so, because I was a gymnast and I didn't do things like that. I'm not good at it and I don't want to. I only wanted to do the things that I was good at. And so as a result, I often missed out on social opportunities or maybe some professional connections that I could have made, or maybe just some friendships or even just some fun, because I wasn't willing to extend myself to other activities because of that rule I had made. And had I been more open to doing physical activities that I didn't have as much experience with, and be willing to learn new things without needing to be really good at them right away, I would have had some more enriching experiences. And so I do feel like because of that rigid rule I held on to, I missed out on some things that may have benefited me. So think about it for a minute. Do you have any rules or rigid beliefs from your time as an athlete that may keep you from doing certain things? Just some examples that I could come up with in the moment here is maybe you think that if you can't bench a certain amount any longer, that you're lazy or you're losing your fitness. So you keep pushing yourself to do what you no longer need to do, right? You don't need to max out on benching and risk injury and major wear and tear on your body as you get older. But if you have this expectation that you should still be able to maintain and do that, that could have some negative effects. Or maybe you continue to push yourself to run 5-minute mile because that's what you used to be able to do. And that's what you feel like the expectation of the rule is. But it's taking all the joy out of running, right? Because maybe it's painful. It's causing some more, long-term injuries, or maybe you run with some friends and they just can't keep up and they don't want to run a 5-minute mile, right? And so then that affects your social interactions with other people. Or it could be things like suppressing your emotions in situations where it would be more beneficial to experience them and be present with them, because, that's what you did as an athlete. We're really good at kind of suppressing our emotions and holding them back and not letting them affect us and our performance. And so if we continue to hold on to, that piece of that athlete identity that, I don't show emotion, I don't let it affect me, I just keep pushing, then that might have some negative effects on you. It's as you move into the next chapter of your life, maybe it's important for you to be able to experience those emotions and sit with them and think about what they are telling you, right? Why they're occurring. So these are just examples, right? There's many ways that holding on to aspects of your athlete identity can have that negative impact, because those aspects that you're holding on to no longer serve you in your life now. Right? So another example that I have of me kind of holding on to something that maybe wasn't serving me was in a yoga class. And this honestly wasn't that long ago. So we all have our moments, right? So I have been practicing yoga since graduate school. So I probably like 20 years now, maybe even more. And as you know, or if you've listened to some previous episodes or, in my earlier story, I was a gymnast, right? So Beam actually was one of my favorite events, and it was one of the ones that I excelled at. And so I always had good balance. I was just used to that. I could do flips on a beam 4 inches wide. That was my kind of claim to fame. It's what I could do. And I loved that I could do that. And so, fast forward to me in a yoga class, maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago. We were, towards the end of class, and we were working on some balance poses. And if you practice yoga and or you experience that some days your balance is good and is on, and other days not so much, right? And we often have imbalances too. So one side you might be able to balance longer or more stably than the other side. That can happen too. So we were working on a number of balance postures, and generally that's something that I enjoy doing, and I can usually maintain my balance pretty well on one foot. And for whatever reason that day, I was not doing very well with that. So I really, really struggled with whatever balance posture it was. I don't even remember what it was. And the yoga teacher who I've been, practicing in his classes a very long time, he could tell that I was starting to get frustrated, that I was struggling with this one particular thing. I think he could just see it on my face and in my body language. And so, he looked at me, he's like, "Tara, what's wrong?" I'm like, "I cannot balance today, and it's really frustrating." And I went back to I used to do flips on a beam 4 inches wide, and now I can't even stand on one foot without falling. And, and that was what I said was bothering me. That's what it was. And he just looked at me and he was like, "Tara, you are not a 14-year-old gymnast anymore. Let it go, move on. Today's just, a day where your balance isn't like it is a lot of the time." And sitting there and judging yourself as, "This is terrible. I'm losing my balance. I should be able to do this." All of these stories that I'm telling myself and getting more and more and more frustrated are not serving me at all. And so if I had been able to just kind of sit with, okay, today my balance on this side is not usually what it is. And that's where I am today. And so I'm going to do these poses and I'm going to get through this practice in the best way I can today. Right? So less judgment, less holding on to, I should be able to do this and why can't I? And this is really bad and I'm so upset. Right? So letting go of that rule that I had made for myself would have benefited me. And so, in the end, after he said that to me, I was like, "You know what? You're right. Why am I getting so upset about this? Just be where you are today." And so that was an aha moment for me. Because I tell this story a lot, and I feel like in that moment, I needed to hear that. And it has always continued to resonate with me over the years, where like, this is where I am today, right? I don't need to hold myself up to a standard of when I was a completely different person. I had completely different strengths. I had completely different mindset, right? Why am I holding myself to those standards of my athlete days when that is not at all where I am right now in this moment? So those are just some of the ways that hanging on to your athlete identity can really affect you. And so before we wrap it up, I just want to make it clear that in no way do I think that former athletes should completely forget that they were athletes. That's not at all what I'm saying. I think that, it could be taken that way, and I don't mean it that way whatsoever. There are so many valuable characteristics and skills that sports foster in us that can really benefit us in the rest of our lives. And I believe that we should bring those with us into sports retirement. I don't think that we should forget that they exist or that we have them. And the strengths that we can foster as former athletes is absolutely going to be a topic in a future episode of this podcast because I think that's really important to talk about too. So just to clarify, the goal here is not to change or forget the story of our lives as athletes. Not at all. It happened. It was something you did. And it was probably amazing, or you wouldn't have kept doing it as long as you did. But to let go of that deep attachment to that content that we have as athletes is so important, so that we can form a sense of self that's beyond how we define ourselves as athletes, right? So we need to move on to who am I now, right? And what's important to me now. You were an athlete, and that's amazing. Athletes do amazing things with their bodies and with themselves and with their work ethic and their discipline and all of those amazing qualities that come along with being an athlete. But now it's time to explore new aspects of you that make you amazing in your life after sport. And so if we continue to grip that athlete identity and let it keep us from all of these other things that we could be experiencing and exploring, that's not going to serve us well. So just try to keep in mind, or try to tell yourself, right, when you're having these thoughts and you need a little bit of self-talk to get you out of it. Playing your sport or doing your sport is something you did. It's not who you are, right? It's something you did. It's not who you are. So I have some free resources for former athletes that can give you some perspective on your athlete identity, and also some tools to help you start to let go of what is holding you back. So I would love for you to check those out. I would love to get your feedback on them. The first one is a quiz. And so it's, a lot of what we just talked about, how is your athlete identity holding you back, right? How strong is it, and is it holding you back? And so there is a quiz that I have that will kind of guide you through that. So you can, I'll put the link in the show notes, but you can also head over to my website, and the quiz is right on the front page, on that homepage there. If you scroll down just a little bit. So my website is vintageathlete.org. So vintageathlete.org, and just head over there right on the homepage. You'll see there's a link to the quiz. The second tool or resource that I have is a free 3-day experience. It's called the Vintage Athlete Awakening. And this is kind of a 3-day resource where I take you through some kind of perspective taking, and also some practices like a physical yoga practice, as well as a meditation practice. And it really focuses specifically on retired athletes and some of those really unique needs, right? And those unique characteristics that former athletes have. So you can head over to my website there, and I'll also link this in the show notes, but it's vintageathlete.org/vintage-athlete-awakening. And you can sign up for free there, and the videos and the resources will get delivered right to your inbox. And the last one I have is a meditation practice. It's a very quick, maybe like 5 to 6 minute meditation about letting go of your athlete identity. So if you feel like this is something that kind of resonated with you, and you're like, yeah, I really am holding on to some of these things that maybe aren't serving me, then you can definitely check out that meditation and go through that practice. And it's a link that you can repeat and do as many times as you want. So yeah, I would love for you to head over and check out any or all of those resources. They're all free, and I would love your feedback on them. So please feel free to do so. I would very much appreciate it. And so that's it for today. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit here that maybe you recognize, that resonated with you, that gave you some clarity on some of the things that maybe are holding you back, or maybe that are getting in your way of being your best self. So with that, I hope to catch you next time on the next episode of the Vintage Athlete Podcast. And until then, keep evolving. Thanks, everyone. Bye. You have officially crossed the finish line of this episode of the Vintage Athlete Podcast.